You have found the Redhead Family Therapy Guy and a Mic podcast, looking at mental health through a pop culture lens.
All right, we're doing this. You're here with the Redhead Family Therapy Guy.
And a Mic.
And I'm John.
I'm Michael.
And this is our first, this is a big deal, guys, because this is the first of many, of course, because we're going viral. And we've got Kevin Shaw with us, and he's been so kind and gracious to come on and talk nonsense and laugh and storytell. And I think it's going to be a great time. So we're really glad that you could be here, Kevin. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure. It's not often that I wake up at 6 a.m., but...
Well, and the other thing,
You're
too,
all morning people. I don't get it.
Well, and you're coming in the lion's den because you're putting yourself in a room with two therapists.
Yeah.
And so, that's a courageous human as well.
I take pride in the fact that I am a human ball of Christmas lights. So start unraveling.
And soulless. So there's Michael.
I'm outnumbered today.
I get tan, so I'm really what you would call a day walker.
How do you get tan?
Yeah, I can get tan, and I don't have freckles.
All right.
So Kevin is redhead, if you haven't picked up
if you're not
on
watching,
that.
if you're not
and
watching.
of course, John is.
Right. And so, now I'm really jealous because you had a card that made me feel like a man for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you tan as a redhead. That's like the holy grail.
Well, it's a little bit of a conundrum. I'm the only redhead and left-handed person in my family.
Oh,
so
And he's a lefty.
Yeah, so to the milkman, whoever you are, I miss you, Dad.
That's fantastic. So my best friend growing up was a lefty. He's we should do it him. So something about these interview podcasts, just to put a little plug, is our goal is to just interview interesting different people.
Yeah.
And so Kevin, you are a business owner. Once you clear your throat there, you're a business owner, and you've got a couple of like online magazines. Is that the vernacular that's used?
Yeah.
Tell us about what you do.
Well, besides choking to death on the water that I thought, I'll take a quick sip and then put it down my lungs. I promise it's not the freedom flu.
Oh, you go.
I started off 18 years ago working for Hot Rod Magazine.
The actual Hot Rod magazine?
Yeah, well, I was hired by Hot Rod, and then a week later, they're like, oh my gosh, please put this guy on Mopar Muscle Magazine, because I like Dodge and Plymouth. And
what did you originally do when you were hired?
Well, write car articles primarily. Humorously enough, I was going to college, and I had no idea what to do in college. I was just like, I'm going to go because that's what.
You're due.
That's what education tells you is you should go to college. Sure. I'm like,
all right.
I hate school, but okay.
Sure.
I'm terrible at this. And
that's a great idea.
I was taking English classes because I liked writing more than math, and the girls were cuter.
And you had to be like one, not only like one of a few guys, but then the only redhead.
Yeah, but that wasn't really working in my favor. So
I can't even relate to that. I can't imagine the redhead thing not working in your favor.
Yeah, everyone's like, "Hey, Ralph from Happy Days." Yeah, that's the guy I had on my poster on my wall. But I was working on old cars with my brother, and I was pretty decent at welding, and I was in writing classes. But at the same time, I was actually testing to be a police officer.
Oh wow!
Just because I was like, they make good money, and that sounds fun. And I had friends who were cops, and they were like, "Dude, you should do it. You should do it." So, on a whim, I had sent an email off to a magazine editor asking some questions, and the guy's like, "Who is this kid?" And we started going back and forth, and he's like, "Wait a minute, you build cars, and you're getting a literature degree," and he's like,
"Okay,
you're a unicorn." So
literally, you're a unicorn.
So. Went out, interviewed. They were like, they didn't even interview me. They just offered me a job.
Cool. After seeing some of what you had already written?
I'd written 2 kind of test articles.
Cool.
And the guy's like, "We're literally going to print these."
So you're hired.
They're like, "We're just gonna print them." So I was like, okay, sweet. I mean, I didn't take the pictures or anything. It was just like, here's like the tech sheet on the car.
That's so
here are the ingredients, bake a cake.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, I can tell a story about a car. That's easy. So put that together, did 2 of them like in my crappy apartment in Huntington Beach, and was like, here you go. And sent them off, and they were like, dude, we're printing these. We're using these. So it was pretty whirlwind that I got interviewed, hired, moved out to Florida, worked at Mopar, what was then Mopar Muscle Magazine, which Mopar is a colloquial term for Dodge, Plymouth, Chrysler muscle cars.
Right.
And then they're like, I would get my work done by, no joke, like 11:30 in the morning.
Pump out.
Is it so? Was this like a full-time job?
Oh, yeah.
Like I have a
Salary
question
job.
about
Cubicle
this.
farm, everything. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've always wondered about this. You see like journalists or media people in movies, and I feel like they're always like out investigating and doing fun stuff, and you never really see them doing the writing. So
Right.
how much of that job were you actually out doing like fun stuff, and how much were you actually just writing and
In the
rewriting?
office.
And
Yeah. Well, okay. First and foremost, most people don't hand you the keys to their $100,000 super rare handheld
right.
car. They're like,
Here, kid.
here you go, 24-year-old psychopath. Here you
You
go.
look like you could trust you, especially because you have a redhead. You're a redhead.
So
That's hilarious.
the writing part, I was pretty quick. Now
Okay.
there's guys who are literally hunt and peck, and they're clicking through. And I was in the cattle corral of cubicles and
Yep.
So this was at Hot Rod.
This was it was the auxiliary building that was in Tampa, Florida.
So you were down in Tampa.
Cool.
I was in Florida. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
they all Hot
And what-
Rod and the big title, Motor Trend and Automobile. Those were in L.A.
What era was this? Like what decade?
What decade? Wow.
Come on, let's be honest.
This was 2004.
Oh, really? I was thinking it might be in the 90s. I was about to get some like Miami Vice stories. I was like, oh, you were there in the 90s?
Well,
we're talking.
Okay.
Don Johnson.
Well, okay, so wow, dude. Is it the gray in my beard? Is that what it is? So I will tell you though, what was funny was that on the periphery of the cattle corral were all the publishers' offices, and those dudes were all holdovers from like the Mad Men era. Oh, yeah. Every publisher had like a small bar. I'm not joking.
That's
My
crazy.
publisher was.
They'd have friends and associates come visit their offices.
There was a routine. Okay, there was a really good routine. By 10 o'clock, you started drinking Dewar's straight, just
Oh, that's hilarious.
just room temperature scotch.
I can't even imagine.
And then everyone would go out to lunch, and then they would wait for the rain because Florida rains on
Yes.
time. And then by 2 o'clock, they all did the back 9 of the golf course.
Oh, that's
Crazy.
So they were gone. I mean,
nobody was
those cats split.
So was it like a big, like, was there like 30 or 100 people? Like, what was
I think in that building at one time they had close to 60. I think it was.
and this is in the
Okay.
2000s, which is kind of
yeah.
impressive because it was moving from print towards
Well, I'll tell you what.
Internet, is that
No, this was the heady years of
the dot.
internet.
That's not a thing.
No one wants to read online.
What are they going to look at? Their phones?
Yeah, well, we didn't have those
Right.
yet. I had the Nokia flip brick.
Yeah.
The hard,
Yep, the big one.
DeWalt
'cause-
yellow
well,
brick.
yeah.
Yeah, because I guess it would have all really changed when smartphones and tablets. So it would have been like 2010. So you were still pre-2010.
Right. Yeah, I was coming in really at the tail end of the print heady years where they're like, we're invulnerable. And I was laughing because I was like, hey, can we like start taking some of our old articles that have gone out of circulation
digitize
and
them?
put them on the website? And the website was like this garbage V Bolton thing, I mean, it was like you almost want to see
VGA.
Well, you want to see like the little
Atari.
dancing baby gif, and it was like the flying toaster. And,
That's right.
but I was like,
really
hey,
funny.
maybe we should pump a little bit of money. And they're like, yeah, you go ahead, kid. So I would do that on my own time.
that's cool.
And in addition to, like I was saying, I got my work done like before lunch. They're like,
Yeah.
well, this kid's sitting around kind of picking his nose.
Let's let him do-
So they kept having me write other magazines. So I started working on Corvette Fever magazine, Vet magazine, and I have no place. I know nothing about Corvette.
So that was all under the same umbrella with Hot Rod?
Oh, yeah.
So how many articles did you have to like produce a week?
Well, I'll tell you what I did monthly, and that was feature-length articles, tech articles, and what you would call a department, which would be like, here's the latest press release, or here's some news, or whatever like that. At one point, I was about 68% of a single
Holy
issue.
cow.
But it was just because I was a vending machine.
Well, this is why this guy rocks 2 websites.
Right. Yeah, no, we're way off topic.
Well, and that is a good question because so you start in a position where, you know, I know Hot Rod.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's a pretty
I'm not
big,
even a car guy,
yeah,
and I knew Hot
company.
Rod.
Sure,
I
yeah.
bought
So
1 or 2 of them.
How
growing
do you
up.
go from that? I would imagine that's a somewhat stable job. I don't know the industry at all.
Yeah.
But
Did
how
it
do you
fall
go
apart
from
then?
that to owning? That seems like a scary transition.
Oh, sure.
Like for me, working in my job, like I'm thinking, I could go do private practice,
So
but
what
that's
you're
scary.
what you're
Sure.
saying is you don't think this is going to become a thing. Is that what you're?
Oh, yeah. It already is a thing, John.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
So I got married, and my wife and I were kind of looking around, and I looked around that office, and I was like, this is around 2007. And I realized real quickly, I'm like, I'm not going anywhere unless somebody dies. These dudes were all lifers. They're
So
like,
there's like no upward momentum.
yeah, and to be honest, I really didn't want my boss's job, although everyone was like, dude, your kid wants your job. And so he kind of started strangling me a little bit. He's like, hey, I don't want you doing this. I don't want you doing that. And I'm like, bro, it's the only reason I'm here.
Yeah.
So I kind of realized, I'm like, okay, the environment's getting a little unfriendly. And my wife's like, well, hey, I don't really want to start a family in Florida. Nothing against our Florida viewers, but
Yeah. There's millions of them, so I appreciate. Appreciate you doing that.
That's a whole contingency. I don't want to, upset.
Thank you.
But so I said, well, hey, I'm from California. Would you be interested in going back to California? And she's like, yeah, that sounds fun. And she's originally from Birmingham, Alabama, so she was like, I'm down. So I started interviewing for jobs, and out of nowhere, I get this phone call, and they say, hey, we're calling from Cycle News, which was
I've heard.
Cycle News has been around since like '63.
I have no idea
Yeah.
what this is.
It was a weekly newspaper for motorcycle enthusiasts.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it had been around forever. Yeah. And they hit me up and they're like, "Hey, you want to come out and interview?" And I'm like, I don't know jack about motorcycles. Like my mom wouldn't let us ride dirt bikes because my brother broke his leg, and when I was like 8, and so she's like, no motorcycles. But anyway, I flew out, and I'm sitting there for like easily 5-10 minutes in this interview, and he's throwing numbers at me. It's like, we're going to double your salary, and we're going to give you this, and I'm like, okay, I'm down.
I'll learn whatever you want me to learn. I love motorcycles.
And then quite literally, I go, okay, well, what kind of motorcycles are we talking about? And he looks at me kind of cross-eyed, and he's like, kid, I want you to run our jet ski magazine. Oh. And I'm like,
okay.
Bro, jet skis, are you serious? And he goes, yeah, why? I'm like, my dad had a rental business in the 80s. I'm like, I grew up with jet skis.
How fortuitous.
And he's like, okay, when can you start? I'm like, I don't know. When do you need me? He goes, well, we have an issue due in a month. I'm like, bah. So
cool.
I put my 2 weeks in. I was gone. My wife still had like a month left of work. So within like the first 6 months of our marriage, we were separated for a month.
Trying to figure that out.
So that was I was going to ask
Right.
later, like,
I
how
said,
do you get the water sports thing going?
Yeah, it's like
That's
So
interesting.
I was the editor of Personal Watercraft Illustrated, which was at the time the longest running paper jet ski magazine.
How long had that been? I've not heard of that
87.
one. Okay, so that's been around for a while.
In fact,
wow.
what was funny was that my first issue was the 30th issue, the 30th anniversary issue. I'm like, how do I celebrate
your
a magazine?
first?
It was my first issue.
That's intense.
And
That's
I was freaking out. I was doing like crazy hours, and they're just like, we're just going to give you a key. Is that cool?
Wow.
I'm like, okay. And I was putting in like gnarly hours, but I was like, I have to get this done. I'm freaking out because it's like, this is my first gig, and it's all on me. And so I was thrashing, like hardcore thrashing. And I was like sleeping in my brother's like guest room, and it was wild. And I was there for 3 years, and I'll tell you, there were days I woke up laughing. I'm like, I can't believe they pay me to do this.
That's
like it was a
cool.
joke. And the problem was that being over one magazine, and then once I got in the groove, there were times where I'm like, I have nothing to do today. So, and I'll tell you how. I'll tell you how.
Machine.
Well, I'll tell you how screwed up this is.
Must be a freaking machine.
This is pre-kids. All right. I love the Paul Simon quote where he's like, "This is back before you, back when times were great." He's talking to his son. And anyway,
I don't know much of that life.
okay, yeah, the Graceland album is like holy scripture to me. I love that album. So anyway, there's certain albums like that where it's like it's totally committed to memory. Like Fleetwood Mac's Dreams.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, so my wife and I had annual passes to Disneyland back when it wasn't, you know, a mortgage on your house.
Yeah.
And so my wife had her job. I was working. I'm done by like 11, 12 o'clock. And I'm like, peace out. I'm going to go ride Big Thunder Mountain. So I would literally sign myself out. And I'd go to Disney for like 3 hours.
That's awesome.
And I'd come home, or I'd come and pick my wife up because we were carpooling. And she'd look at me and she goes, "You went to Disneyland." And I'm like, "How can you tell?" She goes, "You're sweaty." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
And you're tan.
Yeah. So, but that was a lot of fun. And then our first daughter was born, and 3 weeks later, the whole company closed.
Oh. So what year was that?
That was January 1st, 2010.
So it just went out of business then?
Folded. It was
Holy cow.
It
So
was
is that
the crash.
when you came? Because you must have come here not long after that, right?
We moved to Tennessee in 2012.
It's a couple years later.
Yeah, it was 2 years later. I got a job at a digital publisher, automotive. I said, well, I'll go back to muscle cars. And it was soul crushing working at this one place. And don't get me wrong, I have friends who still work there and they love it. And, you know, I actually get along with my former boss now. But at the time, he was trying to get his business up and running.
Sure.
And so he was like, everything's riding on this. And I was not prepared to go work for someone else again.
Yeah.
And
Especially you were your own boss at this other place, right?
And I went from like, I'm going to go to Disneyland for half the day to I'm putting in 10 hours a day for content that I don't like, for a guy that I don't get along with. And it was just soul crushing.
I think this is an interesting topic, right? This idea of when we have a job that we enjoy, it makes it seem less like work, but it's still work, right?
Still
There's
work.
still hard things.
yeah.
It still takes energy, still takes mental space. But then when you have a job that you really aren't jiving with, it becomes really tough. And so sometimes I think we give across this idea, especially to youth, that if you just do what you love, you're gonna love it.
Yeah,
Right.
no,
But that's not always true.
Yeah, working
No,
environment. My worst working environments have been when I've had, like, I think the dividing line for me for sure has been good bosses. I mean, great bosses. I mean, doing something
definitely.
that you're in the ballpark that you love or like, and then, oh my gosh, a boss can sink or swim a career job opportunity.
Well,
I mean,
exactly to your point. It was like I was writing, which I loved, about cars, which I loved, but the environment was such that I was like, I'm strongly considering murdering these people with my bare hands. And it was like, you know,
It's a good thing you're on our podcast today.
Yeah, I'm like, am I okay watching my daughter grow up from behind plexiglass? You know, it was like,
That would have been a different
We're
interview.
really glad that you, if I don't know if you listened to our first episode, but we're glad that you were able to de-escalate.
Oh, yeah.
And,
well, it was to the point that I had to stop and take a lot of assessment and go, okay, let's really take inventory of what matters. And
So let me.
go ahead.
I want to jump in. So you're at this job because you really don't. There's not a lot of options. You just lose your job all of a sudden, and so you're like, okay, I need to get something. You get something that's in the ballpark.
Correct.
Right. It's something that you feel like you'd enjoy. It's just really tough. Do you just leave? Do you stick it out for a while? Like, how do you transition? Is there planning in that?
Well,
Is there's
a lot of factors. If I was a single guy, there'd be a little bit of just grind, because I'm the kind of guy who will grind.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's on me, I'll grind. But I was bringing my misery home to a wife and child.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people just can't disconnect. A lot of people just can't leave the briefcase in the car and come in and be, you know, Ward Cleaver and be like, "Hi, honey, how was your day?"
yeah.
It's just
like misery and sorrow.
because it's just, you know, it's the idea of like you can't shovel garbage all day and come home smelling like a rose.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was bringing it home, and that was really on me. I'm like, okay, this is toxic.
So this is
And-
like an idea, or this is kind of this concept of, I know I can do it. It's not about not being able to do the work
Right,
and
'cause
dealing
you've
with
done
the,
it. I
the
mean, you've done
situation.
it, right?
But really, priorities for you
Certainly.
was when I go home, you know, what am I working for type idea, right?
100%.
And so is is that the most important thing? And it sounds like that's where you're transitioning to in this point in your life is I need to put my most important priority first. Right. How do I now navigate that?
It's a little bit of like, well, am I, for myself and my personal values, it was more of who am I working for? Right. Am I working for me or am I working for the guy who literally writes my checks? Or am I working for my family to provide for my family? And once I came to that assessment, I was like, okay, something has to change.
What helped you get there? You mentioned like coming home and feeling like you're bringing it home, but I think there are plenty of times where I felt like that just gets blurred for me, and it's hard, right? My priorities kind of get mixed. So what was your process that you went through that helped you to be like realize, okay, wait, I need to put my family first, my life quality first at home?
Well, I had a really a lot of people, it's gradual. A lot of people, it's this erosion. And for me, I was very lucky that I had like the moment where I looked at my hands and was like, I'm a monster. And my wife went out with a friend and I was watching our daughter and she was like maybe 2. And it was 2-year-olds will just decide one day, I don't like to eat this one thing I've eaten every day of my life.
Yes.
And I made spaghetti. I'm like, I made spaghetti. And she's like, I'm not eating spaghetti. And I was like, I channeled every evil dad.
Yeah.
I was like, spaghetti. And she started crying and I wiped her down and I just sent her to her room and I sat at the table and I'm like,
what am I doing?
Well, I'm 220 pounds of crap. But I'm like, this is awful.
Dad award given.
Yeah. And I was like, all right.
I don't know those moments.
Yeah. No, this is totally unique to every experience. All you have to,
it must be a redhead thing.
Soulless redheads.
Although I absolutely hate Instagram, one of the nicest things is that it's also giving people an opportunity to like commiserate. And it's like, you see like those little clips of like parents just like, well, I just want to burn my house down. And I'm like, okay, good.
I love the ones of like the kid that's wreaked havoc with like pudding and dirt on the white furniture or whatever.
You just sit there like,
you're like, I love my life right now because that's not happening.
The nicest thing is that people go, okay, I'm not alone.
Right.
So it was that trigger that kind of said, okay, things are changing. Things have to change. And that's when I kind of started reaching out to other opportunities. And I was like, okay, well, also the other thing was that simultaneously we were struggling with trying to even find a house to move into.
Okay.
Now, again, my wife is from Birmingham, and I was looking at $500,000 townhouses.
Wow. Where was this at now?
This was in Southern California. Yeah, Southern California.
Yeah.
And this is the middle of the housing bubble popping. So everything's deflating, and it was still
ridiculous in California.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're never going to buy a house. This is going to be a nightmare. And she's like, let's just get out of here. And I had a wonderful experience years earlier in Tennessee, and actually Knoxville. So I said, hey, how about Knoxville? What do you think about Knoxville? Well, she had family who lived in Cookeville, which wasn't too far.
Yeah.
And so she's like, yeah, I'm down. I'm from the South, so let's do it. So I started looking for work, and I got offered a job at a very, very, very small marketing firm in the auto industry in Nashville. And I interviewed with them, and they were like, please come out. And I flew out, and it fit. And everything everything was answering our checklist. My wife and I had a checklist, and was kind of an answer to prayer. And we're like, whoa, man, okay. So we moved out, and that job lasted a year.
So real quick, let me just clarify. So you have this job. I think you said you were with this job 3 years, and it's really 2 years. 2 years, and it's really just miserable.
Right.
But it sounds like to me you don't just like up and quit. It sounds like you have some planning in there.
Oh, certainly.
To where you're looking. And so how do you, that I think is really hard, right?
Yeah,
when you're in this mindset where it's like, I am done with this, to still stick with it until something comes along.
Right.
How do you work through that?
That is, okay, that's an interesting mindset, because you kind of don't want to be a saboteur. You don't want to be like, I'm burning this place to the ground. I mean, that wasn't my intent, and I still, my work ethic was such that it was like, well, this still represents me And regardless of how big the auto industry is, your name does get.
So not to go off on too much of a tangent here, but work ethic, where does it come from? How do you develop it?
Right.
We've talked a little bit about resilience kind of throughout some of our podcasts. Like, where does that come from? How did you develop it? Because hard things are hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And to be able to get through that, it feels like torture sometimes.
Certainly.
So where does that come from?
I was the youngest of 3 kids, and that's not a big family. But my father was self-employed, and he had several businesses, and he was very much self-motivated and very much like, you get it done and it represents you. Awesome. And he really instilled in us the John Wayne kind of like, your name means something.
Yeah.
And your handshake means something.
That's
and
awesome.
your word means something.
Yeah. That's so lost and so needed.
Oh, certainly. And it's a carryover. And
so what
I was
motivates you to follow through with that?
Well, right now it's a little bit of like, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And people can recognize it.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's now a calling card.
It really is.
Yeah.
Totally
They're like,
true.
he might be a jerk, but that dude gets it done.
We can count on that jerk.
Yeah.
What about when you were younger? Like, it's great to
I
have
was
the
bad as a kid.
example, right? It's great
Right.
to have the example, but what what transpires beyond your example? I know for me, when I follow through with something that I've committed to, I feel good.
Certainly.
Like, there's a big reward just internally for me
Right.
when I do what I say I'm going to do. Whereas when I don't think it matters who you are. You don't feel the same way. There's a
Well,
little bit different of a feeling. What do you think for you?
I like that point, but I'm going to flip it on its head.
Go for it.
Was the biggest dopamine hit for me came when I took the extra mile on my own without being asked, and then it coming back and people going like, dude,
Wow.
I saw you did that.
Yeah, me too.
And because, I mean, it was like, you could always do the job.
Right.
Yeah,
And
but-
even do it well.
Yeah. But it was the idea of, like, for example, my father would always beat into me, if you borrowed something, return it better than you got it. So if you borrow a guy's trailer, you wash it down. You borrow a guy's truck, you vacuum it out, you put gas in the tank. If you borrow, you take the extras. It's a small little thing. It's the small details. It's the small details. It's like with building a hot rod or any project you do. If you build a cabinet and you go and you take the extra effort to clean up the edges and you clean up these things and you just make those little touches, that might not scream to the normie, to the normal passerby.
Yeah.
But the guy who recognizes it and comes up and goes, hey, I saw you did that and that's trick. Or, hey, I saw you did that and that's a neat touch. Or, hey, thanks for filling. You didn't have to fill the tank in my truck, man. It's anytime you need it, it's yours. But the person that you do that exchange with, the person that you have that communication with, that will always stay with them.
Yeah. Well, I think the point too is it's self-satisfying. I mean, if the idea of being a person of honor and integrity is what you're about, which is what I'm hearing, and that's definitely a huge hallmark for me. I mean, to me, the most guy thing there is to be a man of your word and to have integrity. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny, you're throwing out the term like being a guy. I got a ride in this car and it made me feel like a man or whatever.
Well, right, because that's not my thing.
No, well,
I wear Lycra and bike 100 miles across Illinois. You know what I mean? So my man status is a skinny, you guys are both like over 6 foot and big. I'm a skinny, scrawny guy, so that's never been my jam. So, and I don't know if you know, but I'm a therapist. So.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm also 30 pounds overweight. So
I wish I was only 30 over.
Which, by the way, I'm totally comfortable in my manness. But I think that's part of it. Like,
the beard helped when you had the beard.
I know, it was glorious. Oh, you're gonna make me feel loss and sorrow. My career, my full-time gig, for those listening, requires a certain grooming standard, and so no facial hair.
What's the sideburn policy?
You probably could work it. You're allowed to have a mustache too, but my wife tells me I look like a molester when I have
but you see, the problem is you have to have the mutton chop to go with it and go full 73.
I think it's earlobe.
73.
73. Go full 73.
I can tell I get fat ties, little collar down on the shirts, little
Basically, if you could be in the background of a Dirty Harry movie You're in the right spot.
Maybe I should take that. I'll start doing some
Corduroy
research.
coats.
I can work the corduroy. I've got one.
With the elbow pads.
Yes, it has them.
limits.
It has them. I rocked it my first year in private practice in Knoxville, and I totally would be like, bam, and I totally had corduroy with the patches. But
just to get back to the original question was just that when we moved to Nashville, my marketing gig only lasted for about a year, and then I said,
were you already thinking?
I had to your point, I had bought the domain name Watercraft Performance from GoDaddy for like $9.
Crazy.
And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but whatever. It was $9. So I was there, and I'm like, and I really missed doing the jet ski mag because it was a lot of fun. I had friends in the industry, and I kind of knew there wasn't any competition. And I'm like,
I'm going for it.
I'm doing this. And
so did you just start doing it on the side, or when the job here dried up?
When the job, no, I was doing it on the side because they kind of came in and said, listen, this job isn't really working out. And I said, well, I want to start this jet ski mag. And they said, well, we'll be your angel sponsor.
Whoa.
I was like, oh, okay, great. And then 7 months later, they're like, this isn't making enough money. We want our money back. And I'm like, businesses take a while to churn a profit.
10 months.
And they're like, no, it was 7 months. They're like, give us our money back. And I'm like, is
that how it works?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
I'm just saying,
That's not
investments. It's like, isn't that like the whole idea of risk, reward kind of thing? We changed our mind about that risk aspect. We didn't need that back.
So they basically were like, screw you, we're going to shut it down. And thankfully, a good friend of mine who was a little bit of a business coach, he's like, dude, you are the magazine. Go. Yeah. So I said, okay. And I'm like, Heather, they're trying to fire me from my wife. I called her up and I'm like, well, they fired me from my own magazine. And she's like, they can't do that. And thankfully, we got an attorney and I was able to grab the magazine back and so that worked out.
What was that like?
Oh that my gosh, that sounds
super
like
stressful.
That sounds like
like
a sponge.
That does not seem comfortable.
Yeah, that was a tough one because it was like, well, this is my domain name. I own the domain, and they made me sign this non-compete, which was kind of bogus. And then at the same time, my second daughter was born. So I have this weird correlation of my children getting born and then my job going to crap.
No more kids.
You're like, no more kids.
No more kids.
So that was literally the conversation we had with the third one was I'm like, are we risking our business here? And I'm like, am I superstitious? So
that's funny.
So our second daughter was born, and I was it was really funny was that right before she was born, a good friend of mine who was a musician here in Nashville, surprise.
There's not barely any of those.
Yeah, I know. I mean, besides, street corners and the airport. But he was like, hey, listen, there's an endowment for artists. I'm like, I'm not really an artist. He goes, you're a writer, right? I go, yeah. And he goes, you're an artist. So I reached out and I go, so this is what's going on. And they said, oh, we'll set you up with an attorney. It's an endowment for legal representation.
Oh, that's
here in Nashville.
Blessing, dude. That's
so I was like, yeah, I'll go check it out. Whatever. So Thursday night, my daughter was born. Friday, I spent the whole day with my wife and Natalie. And Saturday morning was my appointment, like at 9 o'clock in the morning to go meet. And it was a big kind of, to be honest, it was kind of like a speed dating thing where they set a bunch of tables and they sit these attorneys down. They call your number, you sit
very
down.
Professional.
Yes. Which one do you like the most?
and they just gave you a number. You sit down, you pitch your thing, and they go, I can't help you or I can help you. Well, I show up at like 8:30 in a suit because I'm like, I'm going to meet an attorney. And because my wife's like, go get this thing done. Let's go see if we even have a shot. Whatever. Because otherwise I was like, I'm just going to go weld. I'm going to go do something brainless. Well, not brainless. That's not fair. But something that I'm like, I'll be outside. I'm just going to do something physical. Let's just do this. So I show up. I'm literally white shirt, tie, suit. I'm sitting there with a manila envelope tucked under my arm with all the stuff printed out. I'm like, I don't want to waste this guy's time. And I start looking, and these kids are coming in shorts and flip flops and like, full country gear and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, and it was funny was that when I signed in, they said, oh, well, the attorneys sit over here. You can have, donuts and coffee. And I'm like,
bro.
I'm like, no. I'm here with the
not needing.
With
the flip-flop guys.
With the flip-flop guys. And they're like, they looked at me like, oh, you're not a lawyer? I'm like, no, you don't know who your lawyers are? And I'm like, what's going on here? So I'm waiting. They call my number. And I'm eyeing this guy with silver hair, and he's in a nice polo shirt. And I watched what he pulled in, the car he pulled in, and I'm like, okay, well that's.
So you pick your attorney based.
I'm like, oh, I want that guy. I'm pointing out.
Was it a European sports car or a muscle car?
No, it was a Maserati 4-door. It was a Quattro Porte, which means 4-door. And I'm like, it's like Maserati's getting real clever with their names. And so I was like, okay, I want the Maserati guy. That's awesome. And instead they give me this, okay, you're number 10, go over there. And my guy is this yoked Italian guy, slick back, black hair. He looks younger than me, but he's about the same height, so he's a big dude. And he sits down and he goes, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. And he looks at me and goes, what are you in a suit for? I'm like, I didn't want to waste your time. And he goes, all right, I'll take that. And so I start going through this whole thing, and he's just eyes rolling in the back of his head. He's like, Jet Ski Magazine. What? Who are you? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm going through this whole thing. He looks at the NDA and he goes, well, the NDA is Mickey Mouse because you're the magazine. You're all the contacts. This NDA is a joke. He goes, I can get you out of that NDA. And I was like, hey, thank you so much. He goes, all right, well, give me everything. I'll let you. And he was really disinterested. And the whole thing really was like, okay, this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So I reach out my arm to shake his hand, and he grabs my wrist and he pulls my arm out and he goes, were you in the hospital? And I had my band on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I'm gonna start crying. This sucks.
Well, you're good.
Sorry. And he's looking at it, and he goes, what are you in the hospital for? And I said, well, my daughter was just born. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what? Wait, what? And I go, my second daughter was born a little over a day ago. And both big, meaty Italian hands slam the table. Everyone stops, like record scratch. And he goes, are you? And he goes full Scorsese, like dropping the F-bomb. And he goes, are you effing telling me that these guys fired you with a baby on the way? And he's like, I'm going to freaking tear their heads off. And he's screaming.
Sounds Italian.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, and he sits back down and he goes, you don't worry about nothing. He goes, you launch your magazine on Monday morning. You launch it. He goes, you hit go, you pull the trigger. He goes, I got you for as long as you need me. He's like, I will murder them. And I'm like, and I start crying because I'm like, what's happening?
He roided out.
Oh my gosh. And he's just like,
dad vibe in the house.
He goes, you go back to that hospital, you kiss your wife, you kiss your baby, and you tell him I got you. And I'm like, cool, dude. Thank you. I get in the truck and I'm sobbing in the truck.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think we're good.
Such relief, right?
Oh my gosh.
So cool.
This dude now is a copyright attorney in downtown. He owns his own firm now.
That's awesome.
This dude is a murderer. That's great. The letters I got blind CC'd. So they couldn't see on all the emails. And I'm like, dude, this guy is like this guy's threatening Waterloo on these people.
Wow.
Like, it was unreal. Like, they wrote an apology letter.
Holy cow.
Yeah. It was.
The right attorney can.
Yeah. And all it took was letters.
Yeah.
All it took was just stationery.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So we launched what's and this is such a long way to answer this question.
No, it's great.
Oh, it's a great story.
This launched the Watercraft Journal in the first.
So tell us real quick. So Watercraft Journal, how do we find it, and what is on this resource?
Basically, I jokingly say it's kind of like going to Chipotle and getting a burrito in a bowl. It's like it's a burrito, no tortilla. So. It's everything you would expect from a jet ski enthusiast magazine, but just online.
Nice.
And there's no passwords, there's no downloads,
it's all free.
There's no subscription.
Yeah,
there's no subscription free.
Yeah.
Which is that the model that a lot of these guys try to use?
Some do.
Awesome.
Well,
for the
unfortunately,
consumer.
the paywall method some people were like, okay, hey, listen, if you have a paywall, now you can access our content. And most folks are like, dude, internet's Wild West.
Yeah.
I'll get it elsewhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't want people to go elsewhere. I don't want them going to the forums. I didn't want them going to, this is pre-Facebook.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, Facebook
Been around for a long time.
But no one was using Facebook as all forums like they do today.
Yeah.
So the magazine, basically the template was, we're going to publish 112 pages worth of content just
Online.
every day.
Yeah.
So every day is a new article, Monday through Friday. And, I use the Facebook page as kind of like our newsstand where it's like, hey, here's the new article. And then I send a newsletter out at the end of the week going, here's all the new stuff.
So it's literally like a digital newspaper then.
Digital magazine,
like
articles.
Or magazine, sorry.
Right, magazine content, because it's like, here's event coverage. And we trash the print guys because they're bi-monthly, so every other month you're getting a magazine.
Yeah.
And it's like they're covering events.
You're getting constant content.
That 3 months ago I had double the content, double the pictures and video on.
Yesterday.
Yeah. We're kind of curb stomping those guys.
That's cool.
And then it's like I'm able to integrate video and I'm able to integrate photo galleries and all that kind of stuff.
And so it's all
Watercraft Journal.
Watercraftjournal.com. And
That's great. It's a great website. I have just quick. Yeah. So then the revenue and the way that you pay the bills is it just ads? It's all ads.
Yeah. It's just advertising.
So do people just come to you? Like you have enough people coming through? Like how does that happen? Or do you have to solicit?
Yeah, because I noticed
your
traffic like between your two Facebook pages is like 80,000, and then like between your two YouTube channels about the same.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because our Google edge ranking is an old term, but our Google search is pretty killer. So if anyone goes to Google, if anyone goes to YouTube, they're going to find us fast. You type in Sea-Doo, we're in the top 3. Awesome. At one point with specific searches, we were coming up before Yamaha. We were coming up before Sea-Doo. So I was like,
and what did you like? How did that happen?
Hard work.
Yeah,
just totally.
There's no easy recipe, right?
The internet is a bottomless bucket. You are constantly pouring water into, and you're just shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. You're like, I love what I do. I need to remind myself.
Which comes in even if it's something you enjoy, it's still work, right?
Yeah, it's persistence, consistency, persistence, and reliability. I've never missed a day of publishing in 9 years.
Wow.
Except for like federal
crazy.
holidays.
That's amazing.
And that's been one of the biggest things is I'm like, unless it's a major federal holiday, I've never missed a day of publishing.
And you said that was consistency,
persistence, and reliability.
Yeah, that's
people
great.
can rely on us
great.
to publish every single day. Now, we've had technical difficulties where the website crashes or it's like, GoDaddy or our server or whatever has some sort of technical problem, and then I'll put up like The Simpsons, like technical difficulties, like the guy with the TV camera with the bottle of whiskey going like, oh, technical difficulties. I'm like, hey, sorry guys, we'll be up as soon as we humanly can, but there will always be an article ready for them when that comes up. Now, in around 2015, all my friends from the auto industry were like, bro, all we see you is doing jet ski stuff. When are you going to do a Mopar magazine? I'm like, I don't really want to. I'm like, And excuse me. I said, well, it might be a good excuse to wrench on my car. And I was in a Mopar club here locally, and I was like, well, okay, I'll just kind of lukewarm it. I'll just kind of, But then I realized I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, that's like not your way.
My dad's voice was like,
you can't half-ass anything.
No. Like grabbing me by the ear, shaking me.
How many times did you hear that? Don't half-ass it. I heard that so many times growing up. Don't half-ass it.
I didn't know if I could say that, so I was I was kind of teeing that one up. But that was well. I came from a pretty salty language family, so. But I was just like, I can't just half-ass it. I got a whole ass it.
Yeah.
So 100% ass. So
well, and here's the thing: is you're already, like you said, putting in time
Oh, yeah.
to your water sports. I mean, it's every day basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So then
And
how
by
do you
this time,
fit in?
it was paying the bills.
Oh, that's
by this
great.
time, Watercraft Journal was paying the bills. I wasn't doing a side because I was doing construction the first year and a half.
Just trying to keep things.
Yeah, because it was like, hey, listen, we got $150 advertiser. Woo! Let's go celebrate with ice cream
At Wendy's.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, okay, $1 Frosties. It was like, all right.
Yeah.
And we were renting our house at the time, and it was, it was a struggle to start, and it was like, oh, I'm really gonna put it in. And I was doing everything. I mean, I was writing most everything.
Man.
I was doing all the ad proposals. I was making sure the advertisers were happy.
So what do you think crossed the threshold when you went from doing it and all the other things you could to just keep paying the bills to I can stand on this? What do you think was the?
My wife gave me 3 years. My wife's like, we're putting our $5,000 of savings in, and my brother threw some cash in as kind of a partner. It was, trust me, nothing in my family is free, and there was strings attached, and that was fine. And we signed a little contract and blah blah blah. But it was within 2 years. I was like, okay, well we're paying the rent, we're covering our groceries. We didn't have a car payment, which was nice. Truck was paid off.
Yeah.
Family Jeep was paid off. And I was like, okay, we're
You can buy.
Yeah, I'm like, I can take the family to Olive Garden on Friday night. I was
Upgrade.
like, yeah, I was like, hey, here we go. It was like breadsticks and salad, kids. I was like, here
It's
we go.
so cool because I think people a lot of times people hear business owner and they make all these assumptions and and you hear all the I don't want to get political, but like you hear all this stuff about small businesses and like this is it. This is a small business guy with
It's
2
small
websites.
business.
I mean, and it's
Right.
people don't appreciate just the blood, sweat, and tears and just the joy of like, hey, I can afford Olive Garden with my family.
Right.
Yeah. It's just
And so we were kind of paying the bills and we were kind of plugging along, and I was really worried about threshold. I'm like, well, am I going to hit some sort of ceiling? Is this going to go only so far?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, maybe I need to run another magazine. So it was already kind of teed up. It was already on, in the batter's box. And then, I do want to say one thing was work ethic and building a name. And I'll tell you why it's so imperative was you will find out that whatever industry you're in, your reputation does get passed around.
It absolutely
if it's
does.
super negative or super positive.
Absolutely
if you're middle of the road, people got to ask. I'll tell you, when I was going through the struggles and the lawsuits, when it wasn't a lawsuit, but really just kind of the legal thing that was going on, the owners had sent out an email to what they thought were all of the contributors saying Kevin is no longer with the magazine. And the problem was that they sent basically an entire contacts list email, including all the advertisers.
Oh, so you got it all? Were you CC'd in it?
Well, no, I wasn't. But all of a sudden, my phone started ringing, and it was Sea-Doo, and it was Kawasaki.
Yeah,
it was corporate, and they go, "So you starting your own thing?" And I go, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, they just told me you're out, so obviously we're not going to support them."
Right.
What are you doing?
Wow.
And I'm like, and I'm sitting there like in our
so that
little,
had to be a little bit of the fodder to go. Right?
9 o'clock at night, in my cul-de-sac, barefoot, like answering the phone, and Kawasaki Corporate's like, let us know when you start your new thing.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. It was like, oh my gosh. But it was just that years of reliability. And they're like, this guy's a freight train. We want to get on board.
Right.
That carried with me. Now, with the car magazine, it was a little bit like, oh, good, another digital magazine. Because everyone was jumping on, and there was competition, and I was like, ugh. Mm-hmm. But the model, I was like, A, there's no one in my itty-bitty niche that was doing that. Mm-hmm. And B, no one can, I make the joke about being overweight, but I was like, no one can keep up my pace.
Right.
And it's like everyone wants to sprint, and they'll pull ahead of me for a few months or even a year. But I'm a long distance runner, bro. I will get you on the big end. Mm-hmm. And
you're talking about content wise.
And consistency.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll see guys who will info dump, and then then they won't touch it for a couple months, and then they'll info dump again.
Right.
And I'm like,
And you mentioned earlier the persistence, right?
Yeah.
and the other thing is that the internet rewards persistence.
Yeah, the algorithms.
The algorithm, oh boy, don't get me wrong, I'm chasing that dragon. And
There are some key things to it, man.
right. And again,
I haven't figured it out.
Here's a old school print guy having to learn how to code. Here's an old school print guy learning how to
So do you have
do all that crap.
You have other people in on the operation, or are you
A little bit, yeah.
just like
Yeah.
side, like just contract? kind
Well,
of stuff?
everyone's freelancer.
Yeah.
You know, no one comes in and punches a time card.
Right.
And I'm like, listen, you can make $4,000 a month, or you can make $400 a month. It depends on how much you want to
Yeah,
work.
just what they want.
Yeah.
And I have a phenomenal, godsend of a web administrator, webmaster. And that's an old term, webmaster.
Sure,
You
yeah.
know, makes you sound like a dungeon master.
Dungeon Master.
I'm the
Is he
dungeon
plus
master.
5
Yeah.
to ads?
Your paladin rolls a 12.
Don't roll the 1.
So anyway,
Critical
she's been an absolute miracle. What's great is that the car magazine is.
I love your logo, by the way. It's just the Mopar logo.
Well, that one's hilarious because
I love it. I think it's cool.
if I can tell another story, I hate going over so far on all this stuff. But
No, it's great. I love it.
we had come up with a different name. I wasn't going to call it Mopar Connection Magazine,
Yeah.
and the reason being was that Chrysler, FCA, Stellantis.
Somebody own that? Or?
Oh, yeah. Well, Mopar, they are super precious with their trademark and copyrights. I mean, like, really litigious.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I don't even want to get into that bed. I'm like, this is going to be a nightmare. So I came up with a really clever name that kind of actually hinted at their old performance catalog in the 70s. They had a performance catalog called Direct Connection. So I called ours Directly Connected. And I realized only people over 50 were going to know this joke. And no one knew what we were talking about. And that was for like the first 7-8 months. And I went to a major event, and a buddy of mine who works for Chrysler, he came to me, put his arm around me, and goes, "Bro, you're gonna get the pantsuit off you." I'm like, "No, man, I'm doing this workaround." He goes, "And who do you think you're fooling?" He goes, "They're gonna get you." And I was like, "Crap! So what do I do?" And he goes, "Oh, you just need to talk to this legal office, talk to this guy, blah blah blah." So I reached out. And I was kind of like Oliver Twist, like, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" You know, I'm trying.
Don't
really,
hurt me.
Yeah, I was like,
I have the Italian, but don't hurt me.
I'm like, I'm just like hand wringing, like, I'm really a nice guy, and I'm not poo pooing the new cars, and I swear I'll be nice, I'm like, and it was really funny because they came back, they're like, well, let me look it over, we'll have the team look at it, blah blah blah, and he came back and he goes, "No, man, we're cool, we're good."
That's cool.
And I'm like, all right, cool. And then, no joke, like 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas of 2014, I got a text message going, "Hey, we're gonna call you in about a half an hour." And I was like, "Okay."
Is that good?
So I go downstairs, I go to my desk, and
It's Christmas, so
yeah,
maybe.
Well, and there was a major industry event happening within like a week. So I was getting ready to print out all of my like little handouts and all my little stuff that I was gonna go, booth, because it's a big trade show.
Right.
I was gonna go booth to booth and be like, "Hi, I'm Directly Connected Magazine," and blah blah blah. Yeah. And also my phone rings, and I put my headphones on, and they're like, "Hey, Kevin, I'm up on the 11th floor here in Auburn Hills. I'm with the legal department for Chrysler. We need to have a conversation about your magazine." And I was like, okay. And everyone's like, "Well, it turns out that we really can't let you use the name." And I was like, "Oh crap, dude, am I being shut down?"
You're like,
and they're like, "No, we really like what you're doing. This is great. You're really positive. You're not you're not just hardcore on the old cars, but you're doing new stuff and da-da-da." And I was like, "Okay, all right." And they're like, "Yeah, we just really need you to come up with a different name." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
And then it was funny because I could tell I was on one of those conference table speakerphones.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just hear this
How many
voice.
people are in the room?
Oh yeah. And I hear this voice from like the end of the table, and he goes, "Hey Kevin, it's Bob blankety blank. Gotta ask you a question." I'm like, "How many packs do you smoke a day? Is that the question?" And he's like, "So why the hell ain't you using Mopar?" I go, "In the name?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, to be honest, I really didn't want the legal battle." "Son, you're doing it right now." And I was like, "Oh, well, can I?" And he laughs and he goes, yeah, if you can find a name. And I immediately opened up a window on my desktop and I was like,
I'll try this.
I was like, Mopar Connection, sold. You know, I'm on GoDaddy. I'm like, MoparConnection.com, sold. Mopar Connection magazine, $11.
Bing.
Bought. And I go, okay, I just bought it. And he's like, what? And I said,
thank you for the legal advice.
I said, I just bought Mopar Connection magazine for $12 on GoDaddy. And he's like, well, I'll be damned. All right. He goes, send us a logo. He goes, send us a logo and to approve, and it's yours. Awesome. And I was like, okay, cool. And then this girl chimes in. And this woman chimes in, and
how unwoke of you.
Well, no, it was very obvious that she was a professional, and she'd
it's okay.
been there
You're
for
a soulless redhead. It's fine.
God, Daywalker, I got half a soul. And she goes, I'll tell you what, Kevin, if you'd like, you can use the Omega M, which is the sanctified name for the big blue M.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and she goes, well, you know that Mopar Muscle Magazine can't use it. And so can't these guys. And she names all the other magazines, which included the magazine I start my career with.
Wow.
And she goes, they can't. We're going to let you.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like...
Talk about it's like you were deemed a knight. It's like...
Well, it was...
like Chrysler royalty is like...
So I was like, okay, thank you. And then she leans in, she goes, but if you want to sell T-shirts, we get 17.5% of all the sales. I'm like... okay, whatever. I was like, whatever it takes. I'm like, I have 3 kids now. Do you want one? Like, whatever it takes. And so so cool. And within like 5 days, I got the pamphlet. I had to sign everything and send it off. And I show up at this trade show, this
Rebranding,
what's called PRI, and I'm running around going, we're Mopar Connection magazine here, and they're like, whoa, dude, new Mopar magazine. So that cool.
That's huge.
Cannon shot us way ahead.
So when John told me, I was like, does he work for like Chrysler? Like I didn't understand how. I didn't know it was your thing because it's.
I went to your Facebook and I was like, no, dude, like he's the guy.
Yeah,
and John was like, no, it's him. I was like, wow, how do you do that?
And I can say that in our proposals to people. I'm like, we're the only digital magazine officially licensed through what's called now Stellantis, and Stellantis is now the parent company. When the merger of Fiat and Peugeot came in and bought Chrysler America, they renamed it Stellantis about a year and a half ago, which is an interesting choice.
Yeah, doesn't sound very American.
No, it used to be FCA, which was Fiat Chrysler America or Fiat Chrysler Automobile, and the Americans were like Fiat Chrysler America, and they're like, dude, it's global. We're like, okay, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. But then for whatever reason, they changed it to Stellantis, and everyone kind of went, okay.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's a celestial body.
Oh,
of course.
Okay.
And everyone's kind of like,
that's what I see that every day when I look in the mirror, so I can't really know that. Let me ask you a quick.
Hubris 1 to 11.
What do you of the two? Does one play on your heartstrings more? Are you?
It depends on the day.
Yeah. Or is it just fun to have both?
It's fun to have both because it's like days I get to drive the car around and hot rod it around because it is a project car. Although I bought that I have a '69 Dodge Charger. We never
which you'll see some pictures.
Okay. And that was our first project car, and we've got a handful of different project cars, not just mine, but the guys who work with me. And
the Mopar Connection crew.
The Mopar Connection guys, and I am absolutely blessed by the guys who work with us because they absolutely know what they're talking about. I'm really hands off. I mean, I kind of cool. I literally lightly proofread a lot of these articles and make sure that there's no double spacing or
just do some editing.
Yeah, the layout looks good.
I need a T-shirt.
And we have a Teespring store. Go for it,
dude. The zombie, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's
legit.
That's a '70 Super Bee that is more rust than car, and it's in metal jail out in North Carolina. It's going to take a long time for that car.
I've always, and it's still, I have two, if life ever blesses me to, I have a lot of expendable income. I definitely want an old Bug. Okay. And I definitely want an old Jeep.
Cool.
I want the Jeep's got to be orange. I want to do orange, and I definitely want a Bug, and the Bug's probably going to be yellow at some point. But yeah, I would love to have it. I love it.
An Autobot symbol on the trunk.
You have these two websites,
right?
But then John had sent me a YouTube channel.
Yes.
So do you have more than one YouTube channel? I've seen the water sports
Well,
one.
they both
Watercraft.
Watercraft Journal.
Watercraft, sorry.
Yeah,
he's got the
Watercraft
Mopar
Journal has kind of gone thermonuclear. Mopar has not, and that's primarily because I really haven't put, quite frankly, the mental bandwidth into it.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's interesting to hear you say, because like, you know, the Watercraft's got lower subscribers than
No, it
Mopar.
doesn't. Absolutely not.
Oh, that's interesting.
the
YouTube?
Watercraft
Mopar
Journal.
Connection.
Oh, I'm looking at a different.
Right.
Sorry.
Mopar Connection only has just over 500
I'm so sorry.
subscribers.
I'm looking at somebody else's channel.
So
yeah,
with
Watercraft Journal
this-
has 17,000.
What happened that made you say? Because I'm guessing you didn't start the YouTube the same time.
No.
Because
Yeah.
this probably came many years later.
Segueing into video was I was kind of drag kicking and screaming.
Yeah, that's where it's at these days. Man.
I know, and the problem is that it's like I'm kind of like the old man banging his hand on the table, like you're gonna read. You need to read. You morons need to read.
You're in a different era, brother.
And people are like, I don't like words. I like pictures that move.
Words are scary.
So what had happened was that I started using the YouTube channel as supplementary content to our articles. So the article, if I reviewed a new Wave Runner, Yamaha or Cowie or Sea-Doo or whatever it was.
You're posting every day, dude. That's true.
Oh, dude, no. We're kind of crushing it.
That's awesome.
And like our growth rate is bananas.
Your what are these called? What are
The
these?
quick topics.
No, the
Thumbnail.
picture. Yeah, the thumbnails
Thumbnail.
are awesome, dude. The thumbnails.
Appreciate it.
They look
Well, it's
great.
also everything's got to be aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
good. Well,
And
it makes you
it
want to
looks
click on it.
great.
Well,
it makes you want to
it's
click on it.
also a little bit of like my graphic arts history kind of materializing. But yeah, Watercraft was interesting because it was primarily just an episodic, like I do 1 or 2 episodes, quote unquote,
Yeah.
Right.
a month. And it was like a little 8 to 10 minute little episode of like, hey, I got my hands on a new Kawasaki. We're going to go here. Let me do a review of it, blah, blah, blah. And that video would be inserted into the article. And then we got advertisers on the YouTube channel. And we got sponsors who were like, hey, I want you to wear our life vests. I want you to wear our shorts. I want you to wear our sunglasses.
It's so interesting how like you'll have like a 900 view and then like a 3,400 view. It's
yeah.
so
And
interesting how
then
that-
there'll be the one that's like, here's $250,000. And you're like, what
I
just
wonder if
happened?
we can get like a life vest sponsor.
Yeah, well, I'll wear it.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll wear it.
Show up
I
wearing
really
a
For our
would
Back
love-
to the Future episode. Have some
Yes,
life.
I would love it if somebody wanted me to wear a hat for them, dude.
Dork thinks he's
I'll
gonna
change my
drown.
logo and put a hat on that thing.
Yeah.
No, that's cool, man.
And to be honest, a lot of it is reaching out.
Is it? Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
making connections.
Is reaching out and just saying, hi, this is what we got. We'd love to introduce our audience to your product.
Yeah, it's
You
that
know,
cross.
Right. And a lot of times I go back to, I make the joke, it's the Rachel / Diet Coke philosophy. Was Diet Coke, and this was something that not a lot of people thought about, was Diet Coke paid an exorbitant amount of money during the mid-90s to have Rachel Green on Friends drink a Diet Coke.
on their show, yeah.
Right. Well, apparently
Product
she didn't
placement.
like to. So they would just put it on the table.
Oh.
And she would never drink it, but it was always, she would hold it or she'd put it down. And it was one of the, now obviously all of
It's the aspartame.
like my wife and all of her friends who love the show Friends and still watch it are going to be like, Kevin, you don't know what you're talking about. She drank it all the time. I don't know. But I just remember reading the article about the product placement.
Right.
And product placement was so instrumental in those years of television.
Dude, I just watched Better Off Dead because we were thinking
Oh my
about
gosh.
doing it, right? So I
All
watched
the
Better-
movies back
and
then
check it
had
out, no
product
joke.
placement.
My wife and I are like, holy crap, there's product placement for they do the winter gear. With the
North Face?
North Face
Oh,
is
yeah.
like on the wall,
When you
and
go
then
snooping.
somewhere else. I was like,
Yeah.
North Face was product placement in Better
Well,
Off
in
Dead. That's
Wayne's
crazy.
World, right? Wayne's World is
Well, they
classic
were-
poke
well,
at it,
yeah,
right?
that's- yeah.
Where he's like
Like,
talking
Wearing
to the camera.
Nike
with-
hat,
yeah.
drinking
eating a pizza. and,
Pepsi.
But it's
Yeah.
true. Like back then,
Yeah.
all the
Right.
movies had it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's still going on now.
Yeah.
oh,
it's true.
but
That's
it
true.
went on. I mean, well, think about Disneyland in 1955. Walt's like, I'm not footing the bill for this. So General Electric paid for the train. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
or General Electric was the House of Tomorrow. And then you would have the tortilla chips company would suddenly be the sponsor of the Mexican restaurant,
right?
Or Hormel Chili would be the barbecue place.
Yeah,
and,
well, it's
and all of it.
Who's got that money, right?
There was literally the Carnation Plaza brought to you by Coca-Cola, and so Walt was very smartly going around saying, "Hey, can you help pitch in on this?" And that was always the gig. Was the Nestle? Nestle was the ice cream shop or whatever, and that was how the model was. And to be honest, Epcot was the same way.
Right.
And a lot of it still exists.
Yeah.
Well, I think the interesting theme that I'm hearing is that it takes hard work, and it takes that persistence. It takes the consistency to be able to do things that you want to do. Even if you enjoy it, it still takes the hard work. And even with growing, your channel and be able to have an income come from it, or growing your websites and have income, you're not just sitting around waiting for people to reach out. You have to put the work in.
You got to be proactive.
Yeah.
The other thing that I will definitely convey is you got to be light on your feet. And being light on your feet is also being receptive to change and receptive to input.
Yeah.
And like I make the joke, I got dragged kicking and screaming into YouTube. And now YouTube consists of so much of my day every day because I saw these models that were succeeding and I was waning in other parts. And I said, okay, well, I need to change it. So every Sunday night we do a live broadcast or live vlog or podcast where I will present quite literally a lesson, a technical lesson or a technical topic. And I'll do that for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then the second half an hour or 45 minutes to an hour, I'll take live questions. And I'll take super chat questions.
Cool. Wow.
And people are like, hey, I'm looking at this. What do you suggest? Or I had this thing break. What do you suggest? And so I'm doing that every Sunday night. Then I take from a news broadcast, typically Tim Pool, and I looked at him and I go, well, he's taking his 3-hour podcast, so was Joe Rogan, and cutting it up into smaller segments.
Yeah, I've already talked about that.
So I'm taking that 1.5 hour, 2-hour podcast
and pulling out 10 minutes.
I'll pull out 5 minutes. I'll pull out 10 minutes.
And some of those will blow. Like some of those will go nuts.
As you can look at it. And it'll just be this hot topic that'll go bananas. And that's my daily content.
Well, one of the other things, and I don't know anything. Really I don't know anything, but you sent me that video. I think it was the Beast guy, and he said it's all like he's like the title. He's like the title is like hitting the right title. He's like a lot of guys will post and then keep working the title until it grabs.
Well, and that's the thing, that John and I have talked a lot about as we've produced the podcast. It's a lot of fun for us, and we have the YouTube, and it's a lot of fun, and we did it to connect and just to do something fun. But it's a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much work. I can't imagine having 2 websites and 2 YouTube channels. It's a lot of work. Like, we have our job, that earns us a living.
Right. Yeah.
But then to do this, it's not a hobby. It's a job. It's work. It's not easy.
Yeah. But it's a blast so far.
It is.
And we've only had one fight, so it's good.
John and I fighting.
We're therapists.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Let's be honest.
But it's the cult of the side hustle.
Yeah.
There's that side hustle cult. You don't ever go, that rabbit hole, it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
No, but it's a blast and super fun to do.
Well, I think that's for I think especially for my girls, I love for them to see that, hey, because I do a YouTube channel with them.
Okay, cool.
And I love for them to see that, hey, it's fun, but I ask them to prepare. I ask them to do an outline. Felicity's really young. She's only 6, so her doing an outline is a little rough. But then they see, hey, Dad has to go and do all this editing afterwards, and it takes time. And they see me, and I love them being able to see that, hey, even things you enjoy, it's still you still have to put in energy, time, work, and it's not always easy.
I think that goes with everything that has value. Mm-hmm. If you want to be in really good shape, guess what? You're putting the time in. You don't just work out, get in shape, and go, well, that's it.
I wish.
Check that box.
And
it's like, hey, do you want a healthy relationship with your wife?
Yeah.
That takes time. That takes communication. That takes actual dating. Mm-hmm. That takes a lot of effort. And everything worth value. It's okay, I want a really nice lawn.
Yeah.
Time.
I got a neighbor who's like,
the Garden of Eden.
Oh yeah, but his lawn's gorgeous. But that cat's out there every day.
Yeah, you have
So
That's
you know,
true.
and I'm like the guy driving his Jeep over the front lawn. Like I got all the groceries. I'm just gonna back into the front door.
Which is so interesting too, and I don't love this phrase, but it's like I know this has become a little bit of a pop phrase, like, you know, choose your hard, you know, choose your difficulty, and it's really true. I mean, you can suffer with a mental illness, you can suffer with an addiction, you can suffer with a family situation that's awful, and that's work. I mean, that's a pain and a work. You know, might as well put your efforts towards something. And I know that that's a big crossover, but I mean, but it can happen and it's doable. I mean, you know, you're a soulless redhead and here you are. So.
Well, I'll tell you, I think a lot of it is the decision. I always hated the whole, like, you choose to be happy. You choose to be happy.
Yeah, something to it.
But it's a decision of you choose to be everything or nothing.
Yeah.
And if you choose, you have to make that decision. And if you're committed to it, then you're going to grind.
Yeah.
And there's a few things to it. And it's like, I was very lucky as a young man, as a teenager, was that a lot of kids at the time weren't aspirational. They didn't look to the older guys at church or a teacher, or they didn't have a mentor, or they didn't seek a mentor. And
I love mentors.
And the mentorship, or even if it's a good example, you look at a guy and you're like, what traits of that guy does that man represent, or woman for that matter? And it's like, what qualities or traits do they have that I want, that I respect? And you know, it's like, I'm very thankful that I had a father who was present and was hardworking and had certain. I mean, there was certain stuff that it's like, okay, well, he's a guy, but there was other stuff that it's like, these are rock solid
Principles.
Pylons that are part of his structure.
Right.
And I respected that, and it was like, you know, of all the things, I could look at my dad and it was like, the guy got the job done.
Right.
He delivered. And I was like, I respect that.
Right.
And there was just little things that for me, and it's not going to be the same for you or anyone else, but it was like, these were the things that I respected, that I was like, okay, well, I want to emulate that. And it's funny, as an adult, you kind of feel like you're like, I'm literally just copying this person, but no one knows this guy, so it looks like it's original to me.
It's still you anyway. Even if you are carbon copying a principle or a way of being, you're still you, and you're still going to pull that on.
And
that
but
authenticity,
everyone does that.
And that authenticity sings through. So I think this is a great segue to Star Wars, because you brought up, because like one of my questions that I wanted to hear from you is, you know, what character from the Star Wars universe is one that you love? And so I'll just jump in with mine, because I don't know what it is. I don't know if I've had some good mentors. Alphonse Pignataro was my therapeutic mentor. Alphonse, I hope you listen to the show, but he was fantastic and everything I needed. He was the Italian old guy. He was Northeast. He had this gigolo feel to him, but he was this big man, but he was also just so genuinely loving, and he had been through some hard things, and man alive, it was just the perfect mentor that I needed in graduate school for family therapy. I was in Philadelphia at Drexel University, and man alive, I needed that. And I just love the metaphors and the style and the story of mentors. That's why Karate Kid is one of my all-time favorite movies. And then of the Star Wars movies, I mean, as a little kid, I loved the Ewoks and Return of the Jedi, but for sure, it's the second movie.
Empire.
Yeah, it's Empire. Okay. And that whole part of the movie, that I love everything about Yoda.
Okay.
I love I love the feel. I love the wisdom. I love the growl. I love.
So your favorite is Yoda.
Oh, dude, the tired master that just loves it all, and I totally fell for number 2 when he spun around at, you know, putting back Count Dooku. I know that, like, there's critique, but I love it.
In Clone Wars.
I loved it. I just loved it.
You want to see your character at their height.
And I really hope they do the origin stories. I really hope they do, and I hope they do them great, because I freaking love.
All right, Kevin,
Yoda.
you can go next. I'll go after.
Well,
or unless you want me to go next, I don't care.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a tough one. I love, like, Star Wars. I love anything Star Wars, but since I've been little, I have always, and especially reading a lot of like the Legends material. So Legends material would be post or pre-Disney buying. So like the expanded universe. Oh man, Obi-Wan.
The Zahn trilogy. And
everything. Yeah, the original.
I know him.
Original Zahn trilogy. Right. The original Thrawn trilogy by Zahn. Obi-Wan Kenobi has always, I just love Obi-Wan Kenobi. I love his role as a mentor. I love the power, and especially in some of the expanded universe, it's just insane. He's up there. I do like Yoda a lot. I do, I do like some expanded universe characters that weren't in. Yeah, I can think of a couple that still haven't been in movies, but I'll go with Obi-Wan. It's that's a really hard question to answer, and I could talk a lot about, but I think Obi-Wan is who I'll go with.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, okay, so I'm getting deep into my literature.
Of the Star Wars universe right now, is that what you're saying?
Well, no.
You mean your character?
My literature degree.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to pull because the reason why I think we all gravitate towards anything is it speaks to our individual personality and our individual goals.
Sure.
That's
and
cool.
Yeah.
It talks to us.
Absolutely.
And it could be why people really gravitate towards Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And of the Harry Potter universe, they'll be like, I really love Hermione, or I really love Ron.
Sure.
Yeah. Those archetypes.
Right. Well, these characters, again, represent something more than just a character. And so it is an archetype.
Yeah.
And when we look at Star Wars and we look at the universe that it has created, and we go from the really rough original, I mean, you go back to 1977 Star Wars, we go to A New Hope, and we look, and these are blatant archetypes.
Sure.
These, I mean, there is not a lot of nuance here. These are, hey, I'm the wide-eyed farm boy who wants to get off the farm.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like as clear as can be.
And I am the mythical wizard.
Right.
And I am the self-serving pirate who's only out for fortune and glory.
Yeah.
And I am the damsel in distress. And I'm the big bad guy. And these
Which is like the epitome of the big bad guy.
Well, but it's like these are these massive archetypes.
Yeah.
But the nuance is what makes these lasting characters. And then we see progression in them. And that's when they become sacred.
Yeah.
That's when they become something that is absolutely individually of value. And of that, I mean, for the longest time, I'd say Obi-Wan Kenobi. But it's like, well, why does Obi-Wan Kenobi speak to me? And it's like, well, he's the mythical wizard. Oh, are you talking about Ben Kenobi out on the outer, out in the outer desert? And oh yeah, I haven't seen him in years, and he's a weirdo, and you don't want to talk to that guy, and he's kind of a creep. And
he might molest children.
And then you show up, and your intro is him doing a bantha scream, and he's like, "What is this dude?" Right? And he's like, "Hello there." I mean, that's our intro. It's like this,
and he's British apparently.
right?
So.
Yeah, because, but see, as British, it sounds
Wise.
to Americans, it sounds wise, and it sounds other.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's what we talked about with Miyagi, right? Is that he had that foreign feel,
and so
essential.
he's other, he's different, he's unique, and then we find that Kenobi represents the old way, and he represents the monolith
Tradition.
the tradition of the Jedi, and all of these things, and he goes, I am this well of knowledge that is of a bygone era. Yeah. And so that's when Luke says, I want to learn the way of the Force.
Yeah. Tap me into this tradition.
Exactly. So unfortunately, I mean, Lucas has said this in multiple interviews, and I know we were talking about it in prior to the show, was literally on set, Lucas had a copy of Joseph Campbell's The Hero of Many Faces.
Dude, I gotta do it. I've heard this guy's name like 5 times and I feel ignorant.
So Campbell came out.
Have you told us your favorite character?
No, I'm getting to it.
Oh, okay, all right. We're still working on it. We've got a long arc.
Well, we have to get there.
No, that's fine.
We have to come to understand and
bring me to it.
Okay.
Preach to me.
So Campbell comes up around the same time as just a little bit after Tolkien.
And who is Campbell? He's just an author? Or?
Campbell was a professor.
Just an author? I think we're going to get in trouble
Sorry.
for that.
I didn't mean it that way. I didn't know if he does other things.
He was. I can't remember what university he taught at, but he was a literature writing professor and coach, and an author in his own right. And I mean, he's a very storied career.
Okay,
but and he was primarily focused in Greek mythology and the mythos of storytelling, and why do humans need storytelling, and why does every culture have these heroes?
We need scripts. I mean, from a developmental behaviorist perspective, which is one of the things that's lost in some of the craziness that's happening today, which, we won't get into the woke, all that kind of stuff, but we need scripts. We need an outline. We need, our mind needs a structure. We were talking about this in our last episode, which actually might post after this, that there is contention or strain between order and chaos.
It provides like purpose and meaning for us. Is that kind of the idea?
Well, it also provides examples.
Yeah.
It provides these storytelling mechanisms provide us of what are aspirational character traits, what are good character traits in our society, what are bad character traits in our society, what should we learn from these characters to build our society. Anthropologically, it's really fun to kind of look back and say, okay, in the last 150 years, how has America grown and changed, whether bad or good, in our storytelling, in our hero worship?
Sure.
So it's like, okay, well, George Washington cut down the cherry tree. Never happened. George Washington threw a nickel across the Potomac. Never happened.
Yeah.
George Washington had wooden teeth. No, he didn't. I mean, it was, he had false teeth, and they made a wooden template to make porcelain teeth from, but it was literally like for a day they carved them.
So this Joseph Campbell that we're hearkening to, is this the guy, did he pass in 87? Is that this guy?
I believe so, yes.
So he's early 19th century, or 20th century.
So he goes back and he starts saying, listen, all of these cultures, they're all repeating the same archetypes. Yeah. They're all repeating the same story. So what he creates is what's called the hero's journey or the hero's cycle.
Right.
And the hero's journey is basically like the call to action, or the wide-eyed farm boy, or the orphan who meets the mystical guide or the mystical wizard, and he takes him on a journey. And he takes them into a faraway land. In that process, he meets or gathers friends and associates who go up against their challenge. They meet their lowest point. Their lowest point is everyone's lost. We're going to lose,
disenfranchised.
And this is where it is a little bit of the my core principles hold up? Do they,
Well, I think one of the other really
Lord of the Rings too, right?
Yeah,
it's Harry Potter. It's Lord of the Rings.
It's all the big
It's every one of them. It's every one of them.
So, and one of the things that's I think a really important characteristic to the beginner of the hero's journey is this sense of there's something more to me.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. That we all need. That we all feel that.
It
right?
is appealing.
It is
latent. We're in our.
Well, it's like a divine thing,
I agree.
right?
It is a call to action. Whether I hate to say it, but it was like, what's holding Luke back from getting off world? Uncle Owen, Aunt Beru, I need you for this season. Maybe next year we'll have the money to get you. Yeah. But the problem is, what happens? The stormtroopers come, they wipe him out. So now he has got nothing holding him back. So he turns to Obi-Wan and he goes,
"Let's do it.
I got to go." So they go to Mos Eisley, and who do they encounter? Han and Chewie, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And now you have you have a selfless person who's brave. Right, Luke is brave. He never lacks in being brave.
So Luke's your guy.
Luke is my guy.
Yeah, the new hope.
Luke has to be my new guy.
Yeah.
Because everything hinges on Luke.
Yeah.
Luke is the core. And the core principles of Luke are bravery, even in
courage,
absolute, overwhelming odds. Luke is not afraid. You will be. I mean, that's the one thing. He's like, I'm not afraid. He goes to Dagobah and he says, I want to learn the ways of the Force. And Yoda's like, there's a lot, you're biting off a lot. And he's like,
once you find out who your dad is,
just to cut in real quick, that's one of my favorite Obi-Wan scenes where we have Yoda, like this mythical figure, right?
Right.
Who's kind of questioning, and then who comes to him?
Like to
Obi-Wan.
talk him into it.
Yeah,
He's
and
like, come on,
says
dude.
to him, "Hey,
Was I any
you can
different?"
do it.
Right.
You can." That's one of my favorite things with Obi-Wan,
Right.
is that even
It is a
Luke, or
reprieve.
even Yoda, who for me is like, oh man, it's
He's egged
Yoda,
on.
looked to, needed that help. But I'm sorry, this is not your
No,
point.
no, I agree.
But
I agree. And you're not wrong whatsoever. I think, but see, it's all part to servicing Luke's growth.
It's a great point.
And in New Hope, they were not expecting to make more movies. They're like, this is a one and done, bro. We're done. And so we see Luke's growth wherein, all right, I'm going to meet the challenge.
Yeah.
I'm going to rise to the challenge. We got to go save the princess from the evil castle. You know, I mean, it's that effort.
Right.
Okay. And you have the pirate. But see, the pirate brings in, Han brings in experience.
Yeah.
He's weathered.
And swag.
Yeah.
He does bring in,
And he's got Chewie, like, please.
right.
I mean, that's the coolest sidekick ever.
Yeah, a 7 foot tall, like, murder dog.
It's awesome. That's just chilling always in the background. He's
yeah.
got your back.
Of course, he also flies the plane and has the bigger gun. You're like,
Yeah.
the dog does all the work.
Yeah.
Man. What the-
He's the muscle.
yeah. So, but then we see Luke. Luke says, "Hey, I'm a decent pilot. I can be part of this raid." And he's the fill-in, and he's the guy who makes the killing shot. All right. So
He's got the secret sauce.
well, the secret sauce is we know that he's gravitating towards the Force, and Obi-Wan comes in ethereally and says, "Let go, Luke."
Yeah.
All right, we got it off. So we see Luke's growth there, and for a one movie, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
But Empire, and I know most fans will say, "Oh, Empire is the best movie. Empire's the best movie."
I just love it.
The problem is that Empire's
I like
incomplete.
Return of the Jedi.
Empire's an incomplete story.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Because it takes them to their hardest. It presses the characters to their hardest point.
Yeah, you have
All
to
right.
have.
But you have to.
have
It's
more.
the press. It's the
Right.
press of the story.
Yeah.
So Luke gets challenged,
The
and
adversity.
Luke loses because Luke doesn't understand the spirit behind the Force, which is it's never offense, it's always defense. All right,
Yeah.
you will lose because he picked a fight with Vader.
Yeah.
All right, and then
Instead of the fight coming to him.
Right, and
Because
then-
then you're standing on your principles. You're standing on the notion of, defending.
Right.
Versus.
I'm gonna
being
go kill
aggressive.
Vader.
Which is a really great point right there. Because when we look at how we respond in our communication, when we attack,
Right.
it's usually from a point of shame that we're not recognizing.
Well, and
but
you-
when we don't attack, we're in control of what our self-view is,
Right.
what our self-story is.
Yes.
And we allow ourselves to hear
Yes.
and then to respond. And
Right.
usually that
Right.
conversation goes better.
Well, when you go on the offensive as well, you're just instantly going to put the other person on the defense.
Well, of course, because
right?
and then your shame triggers their
yes,
shame.
exactly,
Right?
and that's the real. That's war, right?
certainly, and it's also the response versus react
Yeah.
mechanism. So, if you have time to respond, you're more well thought.
Thoughtful.
You are
You're
a little
principled.
bit
You're not out of control.
right.
You're not-
You can take assessment of what's coming at you.
which I loved in episode 1. The juxtaposition of episode 1.
Qui-Gon?
Qui-Gon and Darth Maul.
Yes.
How
Oh,
he
sure.
just like chills.
he gets on his knees.
Yeah, I love it. It's just
that
it's
is
so
a good
like
He collects
I'm like,
himself.
let me just
Right.
chill
Well,
for a
it's
minute. Let me get
Qui-Gon,
my
too.
heart
That's
right
pretty
down.
awesome.
Yeah,
Right.
let me get my heart right down for a second. And Darth Maul is like, all right,
Pacing. Well, he's pacing like a cat.
Yeah.
That's the most interesting fit.
That's
Body language.
Yeah.
He's pacing
So bad.
back and forth like a cat
I
in a
love that
cage.
they brought him back. I'm so excited.
And well, it shows you two different mindsets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's brilliantly contrasted.
But
We took you off.
no, it's okay. It's okay. So Empire has to break down the characters. It has to break them all down. And we know that Han's in love with Leia.
Yeah.
They're building a relationship. Now, mind you, it's more of an
I
attraction.
did not get that as a kid.
No.
I'm not kidding.
Oh,
Like as
really?
a kid, no. I was like, Luke's getting the girl. Of course, he's the hero.
Well, yeah.
Please.
Yeah,
No,
I guess as a
didn't know it
kid,
was
it's
his
harder to
sister.
see the.
Well, they didn't either.
animosity type of
But
Right.
But we're seeing that tug from the very beginning. She goes, I'd sooner kiss a Wookiee. He goes, I can arrange that. I know a Wookiee needs a good kiss. But they're combative. They're combative. And then we have the Mylock scene where they're, on the Mylock scene.
When they're hiding in the
But I love is like, well, maybe you need more scoundrels in your life. And she's like, stop it, you're hurting. But it's this tug.
Right.
And then of course C-3PO comes in and blocks him and he's like, thank you.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
You're always here when I need you.
But
C-3PO always just the most useful character.
we know that Leia is growing attached because when Han disappears, she's like, okay, something's wrong.
Right.
And then they're torturing Han. They effectively kill Han.
Yeah.
She's like, oh my gosh. So she gets broken down and dismantled. Han
I love that they leave
gets
you
broken
hanging.
down.
I love that they leave you hanging till the beginning of.
Well,
I mean, it's
Return of the Jedi, who
the
shows up
opener,
to save Han, right?
Yeah, the
It's
opener
Leia.
of Return is just
Jedi needed to happen for so many reasons. And why people are like, I don't like Jedi. I'm like, you don't like Jedi.
I love
You don't like Jedi because of the Ewoks. The Ewoks are cute.
I loved the Ewoks.
Well, I know, but it's cool to crap on the Ewoks. And I'm like, bro, where did all those helmets that they're playing come from at the end?
Right.
What did the Ewoks want to do to Han and Luke?
Yeah.
Those little bastards were eating the stormtroopers.
Wicket is so cute. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm like, surely they don't eat people. Don't you remember the whole scene?
Yeah.
They are spit roasting Han.
Yep.
I'm like, they're eating stormtroopers at the end.
They made them cute and cuddly for the kids, but
Yeah.
For me, Return of the Jedi has always been it's always been one of my favorite. And everyone always says, well, no, Empire. Everyone always likes Empire. Yeah. But I love Episode 6 because for me, I just love the ending. I love seeing Anakin come back.
That's okay.
His father.
That's why it's so imperative because what is the prophecy? The prophecy of the Force is that he will bring balance to the Force.
Yes.
Ironically enough, it's not Anakin because who brings Anakin back?
Yeah, it's Luke.
Luke.
Yeah.
But see, how does Luke approach Vader? He approaches him, hands over the lightsaber, is allowed to be cuffed, and he says, I know there's still good in you.
Yeah, through love.
Vader snaps, and he looks at me and he goes, it's too late for me.
No, dude.
It's too late.
Never too late.
He knows, well, at least he thinks he knows, I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't come back. And I acknowledge where I was.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't be redeemed. I'm too gone.
Too late.
Yeah.
Too much atrocity, too much genocide.
That line alone says, I have too much blood on my hands. I've done too much. This is a wasted effort. And Luke, who's like, hey, Space Hitler, I think I can redeem you.
I'm your kid, man.
Yeah. He says, I think I can redeem you. Where is that coming from?
Yeah.
He's seen with absolute unmitigated courage, I'm going to present myself to the most vile person in the galaxy, and I'm going to change you back to good. Obi-Wan's like, bro, he's more machine now than man.
Right.
Twisted and evil.
And he just killed me. So
Well, and later, years later, we get even more backstory, right? Well, even through expanded universe, we get backstory, but you don't realize the Obi-Wan Anakin story, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you get a hint of it in 4
Yeah.
that there's something, but it's
a throwaway line.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a good friend. He was a cunning warrior and a good friend.
Yeah.
Okay. We get 3 movies from that one line.
Yeah.
But Luke shows up not as the warrior, but as the priest.
Oh yeah, that's
Luke
cool.
shows up,
true. That's a good point.
and he's not hubris. He's not Episode 5. He's not.
Yeah, he's learned his lesson.
I'm come to revenge Obi-Wan. I've come to strike you down because you're evil. My reasoning is just, by all means.
Sure.
But he's doing it the wrong way. He failed. He lost a hand.
Right.
So we go to Empire, and first we learn that Vader is not the big baddie. We got another one.
Yeah.
He also comes to Vader to redeem Vader, which doesn't make sense to the audience. The audience is like, dude, he's
This is
like
Vader.
It's Vader. Oh my gosh. 6'6" giant David Prowse, like crushing people's necks and like blowing up planets. And this guy, we don't know about what he did in the Jedi Temple to the younglings. We don't know any of that.
Devastating. Yeah.
So anyway, He comes in fully ready to sacrifice himself, self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
I am doing this. It's bigger than me.
Right.
All right.
Got to bring balance.
The one thing I got to get you, I got to correct you from episode 1. I'm sorry.
You mean our episode?
your
one.
episode 1.
Oh, sure.
Not
go
the
ahead.
episode.
All right.
Correct us.
When does Luke go on the offense? What's the line that triggers him?
Oh,
Yeah, it's
that was
when
me.
Darcidius.
Well,
No.
I said he was getting mocked.
oh,
No.
when is it?
That-
When is it? I
Wrong.
don't know.
He does. He goes, take it, strike me down. Because he says, your friends are lost.
Right.
Your little rebellion will be crushed.
little rebellion.
Okay? So he's mocking him, yes,
Yeah.
but he puts his friends in danger. He takes it up and he gets blocked. He immediately pulls it back down and Vader comes at him. Because Vader's like,
Right.
this is where you square off with me, and either you become the apprentice of the Emperor
Or you die.
or you're gone.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm not going to fight you. And he starts hiding. Vader starts poking through the Force. And what does he say?
Oh.
If you won't turn,
Sister.
sister. That's it. He goes on the defense of his sister. And that's when he's like, I have to defend Leia.
Yeah.
And that's when he's like, I'm righteously protecting.
Right. I have a
Leia.
reason now. Yeah.
All right. And that's when he takes down Vader. It's not, I have to save the rebellion. It's, I have to
Save
protect
sister.
Leia because I know you're a threat to Leia.
Yeah.
So it's like, because he loves her. It's out of love, it's out of protection.
Yeah.
So he does that. And that's only when he defeats him in hand-to-hand combat. Good, good. Now finish him. Mm-hmm. He won't. He goes, no. And he throws the sword away.
Right.
He throws it
'Cause
away.
it's not
Because he
about
won. Yeah,
beating
It's
him.
not about beating him.
Yeah, it's not about that.
disarming him.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's saving. And he goes, no, I am a Jedi like my father. And he goes, good. You can die like a Jedi. And then, of course, we know
Yeah.
Anakin throws him down the pit.
Yeah.
that's
and that is Anakin's redemption, is realizing.
Awesome.
Okay. So we see the pendulum swing. And so that is Luke's arc. And Luke's arc has to complete. Luke exists to complete Anakin's arc.
Yeah.
That is the fulfillment
That
of
is
prophecy.
awesome.
Yeah, that's
So Luke has to exist in order to fulfill the prophecy, Anakin's
Yeah.
prophecy.
And
So
not-
that is why
not to
he's
go
a
down
vehicle.
like too much of a rabbit hole with this, but I just have to mention, I think therein lies, and I hope this doesn't open up a huge rabbit hole, but therein lies the issue why it's so hard to have Luke like be in hiding.
Oh, it doesn't exist. I don't.
Right.
I literally put
That's
my ears
what's
and
so
go, no.
hard with
Because they didn't
that.
understand
Well,
the
it
characters.
doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't.
Like,
Well,
once
I'll give
once
you-
they
because-
revealed
because
that part of
someone-
the story,
Right.
it's like, come on.
Well, and someone who has such conviction,
Right.
and absence of this kind of like absence of fear.
Right.
Well, and
To
has
be
Why
fearful.
would they go
right,
Yeah.
and who has
So
climbed?
I'm sorry. I just
no,
wanna
you're
say
correct.
that.
and who has climbed the hierarchical structure, right? I mean, he
Yeah.
became the restorer,
Right.
And it's like he's not going to.
But see
disappear.
that's the whole thing is, and I want to add to that by going back one step. Han Solo has an arc, and no
Yeah.
one believes that Han has an arc. In fact, Harrison Ford never saw the arc. He's like,
Yeah,
kill me.
he wanted
He's
to
done.
be killed
He's done.
off.
I go wrong. Because he has to be completed in that we go from the self-centered, selfish, I'm just here for my reward, kid.
Yeah.
Now at the end, he goes, I got to help out Luke. And so he actually gets the shot off onto Vader and gets him, all right, kid, let's blow this place. Get out of
Yeah.
here. All right, that's the line. So Han sticks around. When we get to Empire, Han's been around, and he knows,
Yep.
he's like, I have a bounty on my head, but I've been hanging out with you guys for 3 years. I
Yep.
got to go make this right.
Right.
And they go, okay, go ahead. We give you permission. Leia's mad he's leaving, not because he's leaving permanently, but just that he'll be gone.
Yeah.
Because she's fighting with the fact of, do I
Yeah,
love him or not?
exactly.
And that's why they're doing this. They're doing the
Right.
schoolyard, pulling each other's hair and calling each
Yep,
other names.
they're being
Right.
kids.
But we know the level of her affection for him
Yeah.
by the end of Empire, beginning of Jedi.
Right.
You know, who's that? Someone who loves you. Okay. He's like, all right, I got it.
Yeah.
By the end of Jedi, the best is the end of Jedi. They said, well, who's going to lead this thing? And they're like, well, we got someone. General Solo.
Yeah.
And he comes in, he goes, he volunteered. He's now sacrificing. He is now doing for something, not because of
Which
money.
is a beautiful
number
art.
one.
Yeah, it is a
Number
beautiful
one, my motivation is money. Number two, my motivation is the girl. Number three, my motivation is something bigger than me.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not
don't
for Leia.
forget friendship in there as well, right?
Well, yeah, but it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
Which
All
is
right?
a whole archetype that you see in other movies too,
Correct.
right? You see this,
I
and
can't
it's a
not.
really cool
Right.
story to see someone who comes from like this selfish perspective that then turns into finding a place,
Correct.
finding meaning, finding happiness, and through that joy.
Right.
And it's no longer a selfish thing.
And being willing to sacrifice, being
Yes.
willing to lay it out.
It's a really cool archetype also.
And that is why Solo's arc matters.
Hmm.
And that's why Jedi is so imperative to Solo. And
great.
I have a friend of mine who's like, "Oh, dude, he could have been out." I'm like, "Then he's incomplete."
Yeah.
He's incomplete. And by the end of Solo, or the end of, Jedi, we know that Han Solo is now a bigger person.
Yep.
He now has a bigger scope. So to show up in Episode 7 and say, well, he's a deadbeat dad and he's off being a space pirate again, is to completely and totally unravel all of that growth.
Yeah. Well, that's what unfortunately, that's what they did.
And
with this.
ultimately,
and
it's
they
nostalgia, right? So when I saw Episode 7, just to see,
certainly.
like I got teary-eyed,
Right. Yeah, I
did too.
right? Because it's like,
But
it's just
it
so
take- it takes-
Well, and
nostalgic.
especially to resurrect the Millennium Falcon. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just,
And the
And-
fact you don't see Luke, I could just go on, but it just, there's a lot of nostalgia, but yeah.
That's the
there's a
problem,
lot
is
of
that they're
things.
hitting that dopamine button.
Yeah.
It's the
Right.
rat with the dopamine button.
it's totally
and
true.
then we're just clicking that button going, oh, that feels good. Ooh, that's familiar. Ooh, that's, it's the South Park member berries. It's like, remember when? Remember this? And we're doing that. And that's the problem, is that it's an absolute dopamine high for 2 hours. But then ultimately it's not satisfying. It's eating, it's reaching into the refrigerator and getting that can of whipped cream and going, bah!
It hit my
Sure.
dopamine button good. I think I think I went 4 times, 5 times
I
maybe.
went 3. I think I went 3.
And maybe it's because
Well,
I wanted
and I
more,
like-
right? I was like, wait.
But see, we also ended we also ended Force Awakens going, okay, well, let's see where they go with
Yeah,
this.
where are they
But the
going?
problem is that we knew the people who were in charge of Star Wars didn't respect the characters.
Yeah.
They wanted the money. It was a cash grab. And they did not have
They got a lot of money.
well, certainly. Well, but you notice every movie made less money.
Yeah, it did.
Every movie made less
It
money.
did.
And it's because the characters and the growth of the characters
Aren't fulfilling.
were muted. They were damned, quite literally. They were damned from their
Yeah, and you
progress.
felt that a little bit each time, right? Each
Absolutely.
movie.
Well, especially the classic characters.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
certainly.
started to feel it more and more by
well,
the
none
time
of them could
9.
grow either. Kylo Ren had no growth,
Yeah.
and neither did Rey, to be honest.
So you think that's because they didn't, like, they maybe tried to kind of create a new, what is it, Joseph Campbell? Like they
The
tried
new
to create
arc.
a new one with Rey, but they used the last one incorrectly, and
So
so,
is
it
this a
kind of
hard- this is a
ruined
hard
it? Is
question.
that-
Here's a hard question.
There was no compulsion for any of those characters.
So yeah, I was going to ask the hard question: is it it's interesting, and I want to be careful out of this, but is it interesting in the attempt to undermine the patriarchal hierarchy? It's like they're trying to find a new story, a new archetype,
Yeah.
and maybe they're genuinely trying to reinvent it, and it's like, but it doesn't hold, it doesn't
But maybe
sing
it doesn't
to your
need
soul.
to be reinvented.
Well, I'll tell- no,
right. It doesn't sing to your soul. It doesn't tell
Yeah.
you the story that you need to hear, right? Like we don't quite. I mean, they don't quite ever do that well for Rey.
That
they
arc-
don't.
It's true.
That
It's not as fulfilling, right?
No. Yeah.
You're kind of still left with like, wait,
Well,
where's the
Campbell's arc? Campbell's arc has been repeated for millennia.
Sure.
By
true.
by thousands of societies. So the arc still, although you can tweak it, still has to be satisfactory for character development.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you want to say, well, what am I getting out of that character?
Right.
What is that?
Yeah.
What does that character represent? It's not just
Teach me.
right. And so the problem is that at no point do we see Rey fail. At no point do we see her be challenged.
It's
And she's no
interesting.
growth arc. Instead, she beats Luke Skywalker at sword fighting. I mean, what?
It's nonsense. Yeah.
This guy disarmed Darth Vader. And it's like, oh, zip, zip, zip.
Yeah, and it's 20 years later.
Right.
It's not like
and it's like, oh, I can outfly the Millennium Falcon, or I can out-engineer the Millennium Falcon better than Han. It's like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? Oh, I just reverse this and do. Well, so she's better at flying the Falcon than Han. She's better at sword fighting and the Force.
What does she have to learn?
Than Luke, and she's better at the Force than Palpatine. Because she can make an X with 2 lightsabers.
Sure.
So, because that's the magic. Yeah. That's the magic thing is making. If you have 2 lightsabers, you can make an X, and then you don't fall susceptible to the dark side. So,
well, the interesting thing I think is what you were just saying with this this arc, right? The really what is Luke's saga, which really is Star Wars, right? So it's the Skywalker saga,
right?
And Rey technically isn't a Skywalker, right?
She's not.
She's kind of like this honorary Skywalker.
No,
but the real story is
she's neither.
Is
she's
Luke.
A thief.
The real story is the Skywalker saga. And it's interesting, right? Because you mention, like you bring up this point in 6 where there's these crucial moments where Luke really stands up for what he is.
Correct.
And because of that, you see Darth Vader kind of diminish and Anakin return.
Correct.
And it's interesting as you're talking about this, I'm kind of thinking, and I think about 9, and I'm thinking, okay, so we have
3.
Ben.
No. First, think about 3 first. Think about the same challenge arises that was between the Emperor, Vader, and Luke, and think about how that was paralleled to 3 and how Anakin failed that test.
Yes.
Where Luke succeeded, where there was no test in 9.
Which I do like the parallels, right? And I could see how they tried to do the parallels in 7, 8, and 9.
Right.
And that's where I think 9 is a little tough with the parallel because they're trying to use Ben coming back from Kylo, and Rey is the Luke, right?
Yeah.
But I don't feel like you have the emotional connections that you just described from 6, right?
No.
Or even 3. I've always loved 3 because it's really interesting to see. I think 2 you start to see Anakin, right? Start to see that come in. But 3 I've always found interesting because then you see the full transition
to craze
to Vader.
Right.
Yeah.
But then with 9, it's kind of, as you've been talking, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can see how you just described this emotional connection that we get, and then the meaning of Luke fulfilling this prophecy, trying to be parallel. Sorry, I think I said 9. In 6.
Yes.
In 6 we see this.
Yeah.
And then we try to see it get paralleled in 9. But it doesn't have the same.
Doesn't punch you.
When Kylo, like when Ben came back, I didn't feel like 6. I need to just use the names.
Yes,
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi for me. When I remember seeing that and it always just tugs at me. Like I love it because it's Anakin comes back.
That's redemption
because of the love
of his son,
right? The purpose and the persistence of his son. And I love that, but then I don't feel it in The Last Jedi.
No. Well, there's so much that needs to be unpacked, and I think the biggest error that was made with the sequels was the insistence, and this is done very commonly in not just pop culture in today's sense, but it's done in just our culture, in the business culture and elsewhere, is the need to break down someone or something in order to elevate the other.
Yeah, it's not how it has to be.
And it's like, if all 3 of us are having a conversation and I am persistently dogging on one of us to belittle someone so that I look better,
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And where does that come from?
And
it's really
it's shame. It comes from shame.
It comes from shame. It comes from self-confidence. It comes from...
Well, it comes from a place of weakness.
It does.
Yeah, and that's the thing that people don't appreciate, and I think is so is so well characterized in Star Wars, right? Is the need to inflate, right? I mean, the greatest sense of weakness of the Sith is that there's no integrity among friends because you can't, right?
Yeah.
If you empower your underling, then you are no longer the
and that's the
emperor.
whole dialogue, right?
And so
with the Sith
there can never be connection.
Right.
There can never be friendship. The thing that, for me, the Harry Potter movie like knocks out of the park, and I hope you got it when you watched Order of the Phoenix, that moment where Harry is possessed and he's being vexed by evil, and and Dumbledore's like, it's not how you're the same, it's how you're different. And the flashes of friendship, and I have a father figure, and I have a place that I belong, and it's like, bam, like that's it, like that's the eternal truth.
Well,
that touches our soul.
It's that assessment of where's my value. What do I value most? Think about it this way: Anakin, the most important scene in
the prequels,
the Sith in Rise of, or Return of the Sith, is not the fight, the 12-minute fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Although it's powerful, it's not the most powerful. It's not the most pivotal scene. The most pivotal scene is Mace Windu having pinned. Having pinned the Emperor. And he says he's too dangerous to be kept alive. What's Anakin's words?
I don't remember what his words are.
I need him. Why? Because of his terror of losing Padme. Because I can't lose anyone else. I can't sacrifice anymore. I can't give up anymore. It's too much to ask of me.
Which sadly happens.
Certainly. And he's
that's
justified.
The tragedy. He's
justified in it. But if he had the right mindset, if his goals were in the other way, in totally differently aligned, I mean, think about it. There's a heart-wrenching comic. I'm not going to get through it. There is a heart-wrenching one-page comic that reenacts the scene. It's Mace Windu. He's got the Emperor pinned, and he says, "Anakin, help me. We need to stop him."
Oh, it's so painful.
And they cut off the Emperor's head together. Then the next scene is he gets married to Padme with young Obi-Wan, and Mace Windu present. He comes out and says, "I have to leave the Jedi Order. I'm in love with Padme Amidala. We're going to be married. We're having a family." And they go, "Okay." And all of a sudden, the next thing you see is he's got the infants. He's got the two kids. And then there's a really fun little scene where I think Luke, as like a 5-year-old, has got Anakin's gold arm, and he's running around the room.
That's cool.
And he's got a beard, and he's a parent, and Padme is with little Leia, and he's face to face with a very young Luke, and he goes, "Tell your sister." Crap. He goes, "Tell your sister you were right about me." And Luke looks at his dad as father. And he goes, "Father," and it cuts to Luke in the black in Jedi with the de-helmeted, de-shrouded Vader, and he says, "I won't leave you." And it's the moment, it's the flash of what could have been. Had I made this choice, I had Padme, I had my children. But I acted in fear, and I lost everything. And that is the parallel that's absolutely imperative between those two characters, and why none of that exists, because they had to destroy Luke, they had to destroy Han.
They thought they did.
They had to neuter Leia, or make Leia something else, and suddenly now she's a Jedi Master, and it was this the third movie of that sequel trilogy is an apology tour. I'm sorry, we'll try to redeem Luke, and we'll bring Han back, and we'll make Leia this, and it didn't matter. It wasn't satisfactory because they
didn't deliver. They didn't set it up.
They had destroyed all those characters, and there wasn't that growth. And we never saw Rey grow. We never saw Rey be challenged and dismantled. The only thing that we had was your parents were junkers. They sold you for drinking money.
Right.
And it was like, well, that's her challenge. That's not her I'm your father moment. It's supposed to be, but it's not.
So my suggestion is that the new 3 just be a dream. And they go back.
Yeah, well,
of course, unfortunately,
they're going to dismantle it because
Leia is no longer with us.
Yeah,
but,
the problem.
Well, and then they gave us Mandalorian, which for me has been I've loved Mandalorian.
But you realize that
we got to have him come back and talk about Mandalorian.
Yeah.
well, we know what's going to happen in the future is that Filoni is going to use the temple and the room of time, the space in between spaces from Rebels, to undo.
Oh,
They're going to undo it.
Do you think so?
Oh, that would be
Guaranteed.
good.
Guaranteed.
They got a group of people like I said.
didn't even think about that.
Oh no!
Okay,
they're going to use the room, the space between space.
Well, it exists. I mean, Marvel's all over the place. I mean,
that's how we get Ahsoka back, because Ahsoka died fighting Vader.
Yeah,
in Clone Wars, and we get her back.
blown.
Actually, she died in episode or season 2 of. I watched all of Clone Wars.
Yeah, and
Rebels with my daughter.
Yeah, you have to watch Clone Wars and Rebels.
Dude,
Rebels, I love.
Rebels took.
it
was a slow burn. First hour or first season, you're like, ugh.
I think I fell asleep in the first episode.
I
That's
love
always a killer
Rebels.
for me. If I fall asleep during a show, it's like really hard for me to go back.
Second, third season is absolute Star Wars mainlined in your own.
Yeah, I love it. It's what made me love Dave Filoni.
Yeah,
Filoni.
So I don't know the Old Republic stuff or whatever, but I really hope.
Well, Rebels is just right before 4.
I really hope we get a Keanu Reeves in the Star Wars universe. I'm sorry, I like Keanu Reeves.
As
I
Revan?
like John Wick. I like
Would he be John Wick or would
he's
he
gonna
be
be Revan.
Be Neo?
Is he a baddie?
They want to be Darth Revan.
Yeah, he should be a bad guy.
I've heard that rumor before.
yeah.
He should be a bad guy, and because he always, I think it would be a great term for him.
He would look it, especially with this longer hair.
Right.
And, yeah.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us for another one.
Thank you, Kevin.
It was way
awesome.
too long.
No, it's just fun. It's just fun.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right. Adios.
See ya.